Hello everyone, and welcome to Black Literature, ES 3691. We're going to take a very eclectic approach to contemporary African American literature, um, some of it early 20th century literature and some of it 21st century literature. We're going to be focusing on the graphic novelization of classic African American literature, the postmodern narrative, playwriting that incorporates the dialect and social and economic circumstances of the urban experience, and the integration of vampire and horror genre writing. You should really enjoy that. ES 3691, as I said, will primarily include 20th and 21st century African American fiction from the Harlem Renaissance forward. We're going to be reading four texts. The first of these that we're going to start with now, in the beginning of the course, is African American Classics. This is a graphic novelization of classic African American literature. So you've got everything in there from some Langston Hughes, Jean Toomer, to Zora Neale Hurston, W.E.B. Du Bois. And what I really want you to think about in the graphic novelization of the classics is how illustrating it changes it, and frankly, what choices each artist made in trying to render the ethos of the piece. You'll see that the art is vastly different from piece to piece. Really, when you think about how you're going to see some certain sort of folk art for the Zora Neale Hurston piece, and then at the same time, by the time you get to Shalmaneser, the Francis E.W. Harper story, you'll see this kind of reverence for the historical material that's being presented there. Why do the art styles within these pieces contrast in this way? And does it in any sense contribute to a different feeling that you have about the narrative? So I definitely want you to think about how the illustrations create some sort of a feeling about the work. All right, more on that later because I'll put out another short video on African American classics. Just want to continue breaking down the rest of the course for you. You have a series of four assignments. Each of these assignments constitute an application of the reading and what you're getting from the reading. So I'm asking you to do more than write a paper in sort of a standard critical argumentative sense. I'm asking you to apply the work to a scenario. Now you are given four scenarios. Four. One of these is the scenario of imagining that you are a film producer, pitching the texts that you're reading. The second is that you're a politician who is both using the one of the readings as a metaphor to get legislation through the Congress or whatever you want to imagine, state senate, but has also crafted legislation that is relevant to one of the themes in the writing. So you actually have to think about what kind of legislation could be relevant to the particular work that you choose, and what passage or section from the reading would be constitute a relevant metaphor for getting that legislation passed. The next scenario is that of being an art photographer, and in this one you are actually asked to go out and take pictures as a photographer would, and to explain those, at least three photographs, and explain how these help other people to understand the text, how you were inspired by the text to take these particular pictures, etc. And then finally, you are to take the position that I'm in, which is to imagine yourself as a university professor teaching a class in African American Studies that features this text, or one of these texts. Now, let's be clear. There are four scenarios, and there are four texts. What I'm asking you to do is, for every text that you read, you have a choice. You have a choice of which scenario you want to apply to that text. So for example, you might take African American Classics, our first reading, and say, you know what I really would like to do? I would like to pitch this as a film. Maybe a film that was made up of several different short pieces. So you will pretend to be a film producer in this case and complete that assignment for African American Classics. When you get to our next text, which is going to be Ishmael Reed's Mumbo Jumbo, maybe you say for that one, you know what, I want to be a university professor for this one. And I want to use this to tell an entire story about maybe the history of jazz or the Harlem Renaissance era or the scandals of the Harding administration, whatever it is that you choose that you want to get into. In fact, there are a lot of things that historically that text can open up for you. Third text, you get into August Wilson's The Piano Lesson, and you say, you know what, for this one, I would like to take music, and I'm inspired by the music in The Piano Lesson and what the music evokes, and I really want to be an art photographer for this one, and I want to create 3 pictures that are really inspired by what I read about music and how I feel about the music and how I feel about music and memory and family and tradition and all the things that are going to come up in August Wilson's The Piano Lesson. And then finally, it may seem a little bit strange for you, but with the vampire piece, Fledgling by Octavia Butler, who's primarily a science fiction writer. This was her last novel, by the way. You might be able to pull out an assignment there where you say, well, I'm going to be a politician, and I'm going to use some of the work from Fledgling, both metaphorically and to suggest some legislation. Now, let's say, for example, that there's a particular kind of legislation that applies to something like African American reparations for slavery. Well, as you're reading Fledgling, there's a real haunting here about the history. Yes, it's a vampire tale, but there's a haunting about the past, and a sense, even for this vampire character, of how they're influenced and affected by, psychologically affected by, and driven by the past. And maybe this helps you to make an argument. It's a bit of a stretch. Fledgling, I think you're going to really have to work with, especially if you want to do something like that, like a political scenario. But at the end of the day, what I want you to understand is you can use any of the 4 scenarios to complete an assignment for any of the 4 texts. If you wanted to use the film producer for assignment for African American classics, do it. If you want to use the politician assignment for African American classics, do it. If you want to use the photographer one for African American classics, do it, and the same thing for the politician. The only requirement here, the only limitation, is that once you use a scenario, you can't repeat the scenario. So if you use the art photographer for African American classics, it's something that you can't use for the remaining 3 novels. So you really want to make a clear choice for yourself about which one of the scenarios you want to apply to the particular text that you're reading. In fact, you might want to consider mapping it all out before you even get started and think about what's going to work best. If you think my example, for example, of a politician scenario for Fledgling doesn't really work for you, maybe it works better for something like The Piano Lesson, do it. If you think that the Fledgling is going to work better for the art photographer, do that, okay? However you see fit, you have a choice, okay? Just make your choices wisely. So that's the bulk of what we're going to be doing here. You have those 4 assignments, and they will constitute 100% of your grade. Again, I'm doing this in a non-traditional way, but I think that I'm also trying to present African American literature, contemporary African American literature, in a non-traditional way as well. And I hope that you enjoy. So welcome to Black Literature, ES 3691. I hope you have a fantastic experience, and I'm hoping that these videos that I put together serve to sort of substitute for the classroom experience that we're not having. Take care.